Hello there, Brad Walsh here, your host of the Empowerography Podcast. Today, my guest is Carly Evans. She is a Reiki master teacher, an author, a speaker, an energy healer, and a coach. Welcome, Carly. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with me today. How are you doing this morning?
Thanks so much for having me. Yeah, well, your morning is very much my evening. It's 9 p.m. here in Australia. So
yeah, I was just going to say your evening.
I'm coming to you from the future. So that's pretty cool.
That is pretty cool, actually. Thank you so much for taking and making the time to be here with me today. I'm really looking forward to and excited to jump in and learn and share all about your journey and all the beautiful work that you do.
Thank you. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
My pleasure. So as mentioned, you are all of those things. You're also a mentor, a self-love advocate, and your coaching, you work specifically with those who are facing a situation of change, trauma, or transformation. And I mean,
yes,
that is one hell of a resume and a lot of hats you wear. How on earth do you find the time for all this? And how important is prioritization and organization to you and in order to stay on top of things?
Oh, I'm so organized. I have to be. Like, I'm really, really super duper organized, which at times can be stressful as well, just to be that organized, But yeah. I've just kind of always naturally been a pretty organized person. And, the technology that we have at our fingertips these days definitely helps with that. So, yeah, I don't know. I did write a blog about this recently about how much I pack into my day. And I'm not really sure how I do it, but I do it. And I think one of the things is that I love everything that I do. So I have a lot of natural energy to do those things. I kind of have a lot of motivation and inspiration throughout my day. And I suppose I get a lot of energy from helping people in the work that I do. So yeah, it just kind of fuels me to keep going. Like at 7 o'clock earlier, I had a live group coaching session with my ladies who were going through my online coaching course. And I felt really, really buzzy after that. So I knew I wouldn't feel tired for this interview with you, even though this is my bedtime normally because I'm up at 5 in the morning. So.
Oh, man. Well, it definitely does make a difference when you absolutely love what you do. It seems like an endless reservoir of energy.
Absolutely. Yeah. When you're in your zone of genius, I mean, you can be, I can find that I'll be really, really tired. I'll come home from a long, hectic day at work, and then I'll launch into a coaching session and I'll just feel completely buzzing afterwards.
So I'm very curious then, with you wearing so many hats, what does your morning routine look like?
Well, I've always been an early bird, I suppose. Not necessarily, I mean, I do want to, but, there is that definite part of me that, the alarm hits at 5 o'clock in the morning, and there is definitely still a part of me that just thinks, I just really want to stay in this warm coziness. But I know from lots of experience, if I hit the snooze alarm, then and I don't kind of have my morning routine down pat before I kind of start my day, I have a completely different day if I don't get up at 5 and exercise. So one of the big parts of my morning routine, well, the first thing I do is have a big drink of water because I really believe that wakes you up a lot more than coffee. We often think, you wake up and you feel tired, and most people will reach for caffeine first thing to wake them up, right? But actually, even if your brain is 1% dehydrated, then you'll feel tired as a result of that. So I've been doing it for so long. I'll scull like a pint of water as soon as I wake up. And by the time I properly start my day at 7, like I've generally had about 2 liters of water in my day. So I'll be up, I'll be in the gym, generally doing a weight session. If it's winter and I'm tired and it's cold and I can't be bothered to do weight straight away, then I'll jump on the bike. I've got my gym in my garage. I kind of built it so that I would literally be able to roll out of bed. Sometimes I'm in there in my slippers, so my PJs. Yeah. If I can't bother to get changed, then I'm in there with my dog. I've got the back door open from the garage, so I kind of do my morning mobilization and stretching and stuff in the sunshine if it's still sunny at 5 a.m. Just really, very consciously absorbing the dawn and really getting that first kind of light into my eyeballs, into my skin, because I'm a big believer in, sunlight kind of really kickstarting your circadian rhythm. And I'll generally have a pretty good weight session. The last 3 days I've actually been doing the Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod. I listened to a podcast interview of his the other day, and it's a book that I've had on my bookshelf for a while, but I kind of was inspired to stop the book that I was reading and actually start reading his book, which I've had for a while. So I've started implementing the miracle morning, and he's got an app. So I've been ticking off my little checklist of all the different things that contribute to the miracle morning. Have you heard of it before?
Yes, I have actually.
Yeah. Do you do that?
I haven't read it yet. No, I haven't read it. I have to do that.
Okay.
I'm in the midst of reading Matthew McConaughey's Green Lights.
Oh, I've read that. Yeah, I read that some time ago. Oh my God, I absolutely love that book. So good. So good.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the Miracle Morning, basically the acronym for it is SAVERS. So you start with like a silence or meditation.
Okay.
And then you go into affirmations and then visualizations and then exercise and then reading and scribing, which is also journaling. So journaling is something that, I've always thought, I probably should do that. Hear about, those 6 things are things that people who are on top of their game do religiously. And Howard Elrod, who wrote this book, basically thought, what would happen if I combine these 6 things into a morning routine? And I've always exercised, I've always read, I've always done visualizations, affirmations, all those kind of things. Scribing, journaling was one of those things that I haven't done a lot of. But I thought, what? He's talking about all these people getting such great results. I'm just going to put all these things into my morning routine and commit to doing it every day for the next year and see what happens. So I'm on day 3 of that.
Excellent. Well, congratulations on implementing that. I think it's awesome.
Thanks.
Carly, what drives, motivates, and inspires you to keep going and pushing and excelling at all that you do?
Oh, the results that I've had in my own life from 22-ish years of personal development now, and the results that my clients get. I'm constantly inspired by I've had probably 5 messages today from clients that I've worked with this week, either doing coaching or distant healing or space clearings on their homes. And, anytime the psychologist brain in me kicks in and thinks, does this stuff really work? Then I'll get a message from the universe, which will be a text message or something from one of my clients saying how much what I've done has helped them. And, anytime I think, I'm really busy, or I wouldn't mind a holiday or a day off, and I get a message like that, I just think, why would I give this up? I absolutely get such a buzz from helping people who are feeling stuck and in trauma and lost and a shell of their former selves, because I've been there too, right? So why wouldn't I keep going? Why wouldn't I feel motivated to still do that stuff? It genuinely lifts me up helping other people.
Love it. Yeah, it is a truly incredible feeling when and you get those confirmations that you are having an impact and making a difference in another human being's life. There's no feeling like it.
Absolutely.
And so what were you doing for a living before making the transition into the entrepreneurial world?
Well, I don't know I think being an entrepreneur came first. I remember being, in primary school and selling. Like, I've grown up with parents who run multiple businesses. So they're amazing role models in terms of relationships and raising a family and running a business and doing all the things together, right? And I knew from watching them, that I always wanted to run a business, but I knew also that I didn't necessarily want to hire staff because it seemed like an absolute pain in the bum. So I remember being, what would I have been? 11 years old at school, like transitioning from primary school to secondary school, where 1 minute I'm one of the biggest kids in the class, and then I'm the tiniest kid in the school. And I remember making these. It was just out of like garden wire, and I'd twist this garden wire, and there was a way that if you put this twist then in the back of your ponytail and threaded your hair through, then it would create this really cool little hairstyle. And I remember selling these to my friends at school. So I was always entrepreneurial, and, my friends would always come to me with their problems. So I just literally was the school counselor. I just I feel like I've been coaching and counseling and mentoring my whole life. So I feel like that came way before getting a job. And I studied a degree in psychology. I did a master's in forensic psychology, and then kind of did temping for a bit. And then I went into being a probation officer in London, in Brixton, which is a pretty challenging place to be a probation officer. Okay. So I did another couple of years at uni, did a degree in criminal justice, and ended up as a parole officer, or probation and parole officer, it's called over there.
Yeah.
And
wow.
That was 16 years ago. And I've actually never stopped doing that. I've had periods where I haven't, because I moved to Australia, and sometimes on the visa that I was on, I couldn't work for the government. But even though I've had breaks, I've generally always worked for either government or non-government.
Okay.
I did do 2 years where I worked for my own business solely on its own. And I actually really missed the work that I do in corrections.
Wow.
So I went back to it. So I do that, and I run my business. And for me, it's all the same thing. It's helping people out of the darkest corners of their minds and helping them to become a better version of themselves and shed the stuff that's holding them back.
That's incredible. So just continuing on the path, similar work to your business, which is incredible, helping people and giving back to people.
Absolutely.
I love it. Now, I've heard a lot of people say that most, if not all, coaches have, of course, been through their own personal struggles and journeys before making the leap into coaching. I mean, we all have had our own shit to deal with and our personal journeys as humans. But what I have found, though, is that for most of the people I speak with who are now coaches, their personal struggles were kind of like the catalyst for becoming a coach. Can you share a little bit about your own personal journey you were on before making the leap into the coaching world?
Absolutely, yeah. So I had definitely been through struggles before I got into coaching. By the time I started properly coaching, what had happened? So I'd lost a few friends to suicide. I'd been in a relationship with someone who had bipolar. He wasn't diagnosed when we met. He had 4 manic episodes when we met. So full-blown psychosis, which if anyone is listening and has experienced that in a partner or in a family member or friend, it's really, really scary. And I was living with that person for 3 years. So I was basically his carer. Right. He was also suicidal, but in a bit of a manipulative way as well. So I remember training as a probation officer and training in domestic violence relationships and reading the information and thinking, I'm in that situation,
Wow.
So I kind of had a good 20 years on and off of abusive relationships in some way. I wasn't ever physically hit, but I was financially abused, emotionally and mentally abused. And I lost myself, and all of that comes from, I did a bit of schematherapy, and I discovered that my schemas are unrelenting standards and self-sacrifice. So in the world of relationships, that really, I kind of really put myself last, I dived into helping other people to my detriment. And for a long time, I didn't realize it was to my detriment because I got so much fulfillment from helping other people that I really didn't see it as a bad thing until I was burnt out, depressed, and just feeling really like I just wasn't myself anymore. I'd completely lost, when I would look in the mirror and I just couldn't see that spark in my eyes anymore. And I couldn't see me. So, I would say what I've been through is abusive relationships, really discovering what self-love is and growing that for myself and setting boundaries. And, suicide prevention has become a big part of my life because I've lost, unfortunately, a lot of friends to suicide. And I think the exploration of really starting to prioritize yourself and realizing that it's not a selfish thing to do, it has been a massive learning curve for me.
Yeah, we have to get over that whole thing about self-love and it being selfish and like it's selfless to be that way. We have to be that way because when we love ourselves and give to ourselves, that only enables us and makes it richer for us to be able to give to other people. And Absolutely. Societal conditioning has led us to believe that loving ourselves and caring for ourselves is selfish. We have to learn how to reprogram that into our minds.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so how have these experiences helped shape the Carly you are today, both personally and professionally, do you think?
Oh, in so many ways. I do find that I teach a lot on self-love these days because it's been the most important lesson that I've learned. And really from a place of not realizing that that was ever a thing for me, right? So I didn't realize that I didn't love myself at all. And, I grew up very fortunate in a really loving family. So if you were to have asked me about my upbringing, I would have said I grew up in a loving family. I've never felt anything but loved by my family. My parents are still together. They are my role models in terms of relationships and running a business and, raising a family, all those things. And in the work of corrections, I work with people who have had the complete opposite of that. So there was a real conflict in me thinking, who am I to think that I've been through hard times and don't love myself, when I'm working with people who, sometimes their stepmom has injected them with heroin when they were 8 years old. So I've not grown up in a life like that at all. And it was never obvious to me that maybe I needed to do work on self-love, because I'm a confident, happy person. I've got loads of friends. I've got an amazing family. I've generally lived a really good life. But there were these things coming up for me still where there was a lack there, right? I was attracting abusive people into my life. I was over delivering in relationships when the other person wasn't committed at all. So, I really had to kind of discover those things for myself to really do the work, and then I suppose teach that to other people. I'm not even sure if I've answered your question, because I just went on a ramble then.
No, that's all good. No, you answered it. And so what was the biggest or most valuable takeaway or lesson for you through your experiences?
Definitely to love yourself. I think you really, I kind of came up with the best question that you can ever ask yourself in any situation, really, which is, if you 100% loved, honored, cherished, and respected yourself, what would be different in your life? Who would be in your life still? Who would not be in your life? Who would you have never given any time to whatsoever? Would you still be in the same house, job, country, relationship? What would you have said yes to? What would you have said no to? I mean, there were so many things that when I reflect on that question and reflect on the life that I've led, not that I have any regrets whatsoever, because all of it has taught me such valuable stuff. But if I had truly, honestly loved and respected myself, there were so many situations I never would have got involved in. I never would have been in any of those abusive relationships. I would have taken my time and walked away when I saw the red flags, instead of investing too early in people who weren't worth it. And I'd have done me first. I'd have given myself what I needed first, and not seen it as a selfish thing, because like you say, you need to fill up your own cup first. I'm not going to give anyone the best energy, whether it's in a relationship, whether it's in a work situation, or in a coaching environment, or in an energy treatment, if I'm not filling my own cup first as a priority.
I think most people would answer that question with some kind of change. They would change something, or some relationship, or something like that. But on the flip side of that, though, changing those things would change the outcome of who you are and your experiences in life, right? So our experiences shape who we are as people. But I would have to say that I would think that most, if not all, people would change one of those aspects of one of those things that you asked within that question.
Oh, definitely.
Right?
We can bullshit ourselves as much as we like. And I see people all day long who, I'll ask them various things about, they've maybe got addictions, or they're stuck in toxic relationships. And I'll ask them various questions about that. And I can see them just go off on all these long tangents, which are for them giving reasons as to why they're stuck in that situation. But really, it's just excuses. And you can do that with any situation. Everyone can. We all do it. It's just a brand of sabotage at the end of the day. But when you ask yourself that question, how would my life be different if I actually really 100% loved and respected myself? You actually cannot bullshit your way through that question at all. And you, in a lot of ways, you don't even need to answer it, because straight away, what's in your life that should be in your life, and what you should be doing more of. And, you would be, if you really loved and respected yourself, you would be that person that exercises, that drinks enough water, that feeds yourself proper food, that says no when you really mean no, and, doesn't keep allowing disrespectful people to treat you like shit and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, all that stuff. Yeah, for sure. And so, Carly, what is it that sets you and the work you do apart from other coaches? Why would they choose to work with you over someone else?
I'm probably one of the most authentic, I hope, one of the most authentic people that you'll ever meet. And I am so unapologetic about that it gets me in trouble. I'm a very sweary person. I'm a warts and all person. I'm not one of these people that will just share all their shiny shit on Facebook. You will see stuff in my rawest moments when I'm going through stuff, because I want people to know that, like I've had a Reiki client in the past say to me, Carly, do you drink alcohol? Do you eat junk food? And I just burst out laughing. I thought, just because I've been teaching Reiki for this long doesn't mean that, I'm a teetotal person who lives on a diet and doesn't, and I just find it really funny that people think that because I'm in that category of I am a really spiritual person, but also what some people would call a geezer bird, in that, I'm very raw, honest, authentic, even when sometimes it doesn't serve me. And even if I don't know if people will like that, like I don't care if you like me or not, because I love me. And I'm like, I say, I'm like Marmite, you either love me or hate me, and I don't care about whether you love me or hate me. I am me, and people will be drawn to me because of that, and people won't be drawn to me because of that. And I'm completely fine with that, because I love myself the way that I am.
And that's where the work comes in, and that's the result of it, is feeling that way. That's beautiful. What, in your opinion, is the most important quality or skill set in a coach?
To be authentic. With the type?
Yeah.
And okay. I think that, and I think that there was a few years there on Facebook and other social media platforms where, people were just sharing their shiny stuff, and, you can go from $0 to $1 million in 0.5 seconds. And here's a photo of me next to a Lamborghini. It doesn't matter, that's not mine. And people are seeing
it's rented. Here's my mansion that I rented for the day.
Exactly. Just for this one photo shoot where I'll take 1 million photos. Not really, and really, I live in a studio flat in London. You will see the real me. And I think people really value that kind of authenticity. And, the most traction I get on any of my social media posts is when I share the challenges that I've been through and let people know that I'm still a work in progress too. And I will be till the day that I die. I've heard, there are so many spiritual narcissists out there who say, this is the way that things have to be done or else. And I've got no baggage left to clear because I've completely healed myself, and I can completely heal you.
Bullshit.
And I always say, exactly. I always say to people, if you hear anything like that, run the fuck away.
Yeah, exactly.
Bullshit. They are a spiritual narcissist.
We are never done the self-work. That is a never-ending journey, period.
And we'll still be doing it in the next life.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, as mentioned, you were talking a little bit about self-love, and you being such a huge advocate for self-love. I want to speak a little bit about that. And I'm curious, what is the difference between self-love and self-care?
That's such a great question, because, for a long time, I thought self-care was self-love. And I had depression back in 2010. So I moved to Australia October 2010, probably around June 2010, maybe a bit before, I probably started getting the symptoms of depression. It probably started with burnout. This was towards the end of my relationship with the guy that had bipolar. And I was, I'd lived in survival mode for so long, with someone who really was not living on this planet at all. And you never knew what was coming every day. And around that time, I think it was in April that year, I slipped a disc in my back. And my go-to stress reliever is the gym. And I slipped a disc in my back pretty badly, and I couldn't exercise at all. So that, suddenly I was signed off work. So I wasn't doing work where I was helping anyone. I was kind of trapped in a relationship where I was a carer for someone who was following me around the house all day long when I was making myself cups of tea and hot water bottles to manage my pain. I was a shell of my former self. And I came out of that relationship, and I went into, I wouldn't say it was a really, really deep depression. With my studies, like I've done a psych degree and master's, and I felt before I had depression that I could have written a thesis on it. I could have told you everything about what depression was, signs, symptoms, treatments, all those kind of things. But until I actually really had it, like I had no clue. And for me, depression was like, I felt like my brain was melting. Like, I love reading, and I thought, okay, I'm signed off work for 4.5 months because of my back. I've got all these books to read. So I thought that's something to get excited about. And I don't know how long I spent trying to read one sentence before I gave up. And I realized my brain could not retain any information. And I felt like my brain had just melted. And from that place, I just kind of focused on self-care, chop wood, fetch water. It was just keep it as simple as you can. Drink water, eat decent food, rest, sleep. And that was pretty much all I could do. And I kind of, by the time I moved to Australia in October, I really felt like I'd overcome depression, but I kind of chemically, brain chemistry wise, I hadn't. I felt way better. I felt back to my normal self. Moved to Australia, which is, a massive change from London. It was a change that I wanted for myself for 10 years. So I just moved over here in just an absolute whirlwind of, wow, this has been my goal for 10 years. But it's hard moving country. You have to set up your entire life again. You've got no credit history. You've got no employment history. It's not that easy. And, I think a lot of people, like I've noticed, I've got a lot of friends who are from all around the world, and they seem to experience the same thing when they move to their kind of almost final destination, where they think, they don't consider the fact that they have to go through almost a bit of a grieving process. And so I went pretty quickly back into depression in early 2011, and I found myself tree planting for my next visa. So I was in a job, and I'd come out of probation in the UK, where in a job where I felt like I was helping people, and I was a resource. I was, doing work that inspired me, that I was passionate about, and then I'm planting trees. And for a while, I kind of convinced myself that, okay, I'm contributing to the environment. And then I'm planting trees in a storm, and everyone's saying they're just going to wash away. All the rabbits are going to eat them anyway. And I thought, God, Australia, can you just, I really just want to work and do proper work. And I'm here planting. I had very quickly, probably in my first month of moving to Australia, entered into a new relationship that then at the time wasn't going so well. So I wasn't in a relationship where I was helping anyone. I wasn't in a job where I was helping anyone. And my life was kind of not all over the place, but I didn't know where I was going or what I was doing. All I knew was I was getting up every day to go and plant trees so that I could get a visa to stay in Australia for good. That was my goal. But there was no fulfillment or anything. And it kind of hit me that, really all I'd done before was self-care. And I realized how all my fulfillment came from helping other people. I remember watering these seedlings at the place that I was working for, and I was listening to a podcast or something, and this idea just hit me that, all my self-worth came from helping other people. And I realized that wasn't good. And I realized that, when I'd tried to quote unquote fix myself before, I just focused on the self-care aspect. And when I realized that I actually didn't love myself in the way that I thought I did, and that I really needed to focus on my self-worth and self-care, I tried to change that in 2011 at that time, but it was still years then. It didn't happen until probably 2016 that I really understood it, And so fast forward to 2016, where I'm in a relationship, I'm engaged. I've just built my first home by the ocean. I quit working full time to run my business full time. And I, in a lot of ways, was living my dream life. But I felt this growing hole. Have you ever experienced that kind of that empty hole around your solar plexus area where you just feel empty inside?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was happening, and I felt like this as an energy worker. I knew this was my solar plexus. This is all about confidence and self-esteem, and this hole was just growing and growing, and I couldn't put my finger on it. And I was listening to a podcast one day, and I was having money issues at that point, and I think the podcast was saying something like, your financial worth will only, or wealth or something, will only grow to the extent that you do. And I had this kind of light bulb moment, where I thought it's all about self-love. And I realized all I've been focusing on was self-care. Self-care are those things. It's having a nice hot bath if you like it, or going to the beach, or doing a face mask, or whatever it is that for you is self-care, right? But
Yeah.
self-love is really vastly different. And self-care is a part of self-love, but self-love is so much more than that. It's things like, saying no when you really want to say no instead of saying yes because you feel obligated to say yes. It's standing up for yourself in any situation where you should. Whereas I spent most of my life not ever saying anything back to anyone where I should have stood up for myself because I thought, I'm a crazy person. I just let things go. And I realized down the track, I never let anything go. I just stored it in a filing cabinet in my head. And, and there would be this filing cabinet based on this one person or, people in my life who had not wronged me, but, that thing that they said that hurt just went in that filing cabinet. And I never forgot it. And, so it was self-love is nourishing yourself before nourishing other people. It's saying no without guilt. It's filling up your own cup before filling up everyone else's. It's so many things, it's doing what you really want to do. And
what makes your soul sing? What makes you happy?
Exactly. It's what your zone of genius is. And I understand, people with families, kids, their kids will be their priority, but really your kids need you to make yourself a priority as well. Because when your cup is full, it's overflowing. You've got everything to give other people as well. It's not, self-love is not doing anything out of obligation. It's not, it's so many things. It's so much more than self-care. Does that make sense? Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I like that you brought up the fact about parents and their kids. And I mean, certain things, yes, you're going to go without to provide for your kids, but you're right. It sets an example. You have to put yourself first too, to set that example for your children as they grow older and they see you loving yourself and doing things for you and putting yourself first so that they know that this is the way they've got to live as well.
You have to model that for them.
Yeah, for sure.
I've put myself last so many times for most of my life. And I didn't consciously necessarily know that I was doing that for a lot of the time.
Yeah.
But
I think that's something common among women, period, is that they put themselves on the back burner so often and put everybody else's needs ahead of their own. And that's just something that a lot of women just do. And you're right. They probably don't even notice that they're doing it.
Until they get burnt out.
Yes,
and
exactly. I was just going to say that.
Yeah, you get burnt out, you get depressed, but you have to keep on keeping on, right? So you feel all those symptoms of burnout, depression, low iron, whatever it might be. Like I've been through all those things and you still just get up and keep fighting the fight. And it is a fight at that point.
Yeah.
You're not sleeping properly, so you don't eat properly. You don't nourish yourself properly. You don't drink enough water. You're giving everyone just a real half-assed version of yourself. But you think that you have to just keep trudging on.
Including yourself. You're giving yourself a half-assed version of you.
Yep.
Which is the most important thing. You got to give yourself 100% all the time.
I was actually listening to a podcast. It was Lewis Howes being interviewed by, I think, Gabby Bernstein. Mm-hmm. I know her name was Gabby, and I think it was for the Gabby Bernstein podcast. And he said, he's been through very, very similar things in terms of his self-worth, and he was abused as a child. He's very, very open with his story on the School of Greatness podcast. Amazing podcast if you haven't listened to it. And he said today, when he met his current partner, who is... he'd gone through a lot of really toxic relationships. And then when he met her, he had done so much work on himself that they just were having these really amazing open discussions. And he said to her, do you want to hear the truth? And she said, yeah, I really want to hear the truth. He said, you're not going to like the truth though. And she's like, come at me. I'm kind of ready. And he said, you will never be the priority. And that sounds really harsh, but what he means is, you will never be the priority because I'm my own priority.
Yes.
And that sounds like some people will say, oh, that's really selfish. you expect a partner to unconditionally love you, but how often, like what percentage of relationships actually, have unconditional love?
The only relationship, in my opinion anyways, the only true relationship that demonstrates unconditional love is between a dog and a human. That's it.
100%.
That's the only relationship.
My dog Squishy, yeah, and she just loves me no matter what.
That's it. I don't give a shit what anybody says. That is the only mammal capable of unconditional love. Humans are not capable of it. You may say you are, but no human being is capable of true 100% pure unconditional love. It's impossible.
And I'm sorry to any cat owners out there. Like, I've grown up with a lot of I love cats, but cats are fucking assholes.
I'm not a fan of cats at all. Dogs are my thing. I'm a dog person 100% through and through.
I have a little bulldog called Squishy, and I've had a lot of dogs, but she's my heart dog. I heard this on a podcast this morning where they were talking about how there'll be that one dog that's your heart dog, and I look at her and my heart I can feel my heart chakra just bursting open.
Yeah.
Just love her to bits.
Dogs are incredible creatures, just incredible. But yeah, they're the only thing capable of unconditional love, in my opinion, anyway.
Totally, yeah.
So often we are told that, as we've been talking about, and we've said it multiple times, self-love is selfish. It's a difficult road for a lot of people to learn to love themselves, as we've been talking about. And I mean, I'm of the mindset and the belief that absolutely everything starts with self. We are the foundation for all of it. So how would you suggest someone start their journey of learning to love themselves?
So I always say the easiest, quickest way, and this is, well, I say easiest and quickest, this is actually a massive challenge for a lot of people. How often do you dish out a compliment and it's instantly like shot back to you? So, I dish out really genuine compliments all day long. I don't do it for the sake of it. So I'll say to someone, "Oh, your hair looks lovely today." And they'll say, "Oh, it's greasy. It needs a wash." Or, "Oh, that top's really nice on you. That color like really, really suits you." "Oh, this old thing, I got it down the Salways about 10 years ago. Oh, it's ripped. I probably need to throw it away." Or they'll feel the need to say, "Oh, I love your top too." And I'll literally say to them, "You know what? Just accept the fucking compliment."
Just take it.
Because that's a really clear indication that someone is uncomfortable with receiving compliments, which is kind of a lack of self-love as well. So a great surface level way to start with growing your sense of self-worth and self-esteem is when someone gives you a compliment, just accept the compliment and just say thank you.
Say thank you. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. I love it.
That's a really easy way to start, because I think you have to, graduate into loving yourself. And, it will be really, really uncomfortable at first. So one of the things I did early when I kind of started realizing this for myself, like I had a friendship, like a best friendship. We were called the Wives. We were that close in the UK.
Yeah.
We lived together for a long time. And, there were a bunch of things that happened and things that she said that kind of, I would feel it and I just go, "Oh, ouch." But I would never say anything. And it was all around kind of realizing that she wasn't as supportive as I wanted her to be, or I felt like I was towards her. And I'd just file it in that filing cabinet, right? I wouldn't say anything. And I'd think, well, I'm the most chilled out, cruisy friend in the world. I just, nothing. I don't react to anything. But I also didn't stand up for myself ever. And over time, this, it kind of, I don't know, it wasn't necessarily a problem until one day I literally just blew up at her. And she stood there staring at me. I'm going mental at her because in my head, I've got all these things that have ever been wrong in our friendship. But for her, this is all brand new, right? So I never told her any of this stuff. So it's not her fault. It's my fault for not standing up for myself.
It had been building for years.
Yeah, literally years. So she's standing at me, crying her eyes out, going, "What's wrong with you?" And I'm going, "Well, these are all the things that you fucked me over with. But she's like, what are you talking about? And so from that moment, because it broke our friendship, and we were really, really good friends. And in that moment, I decided, you know what? I'm never going to pretend to be the cruisy friend again that just lets stuff go, because I'm clearly not. It's going in that filing cabinet in my head. So the next time someone said something, like I remember around this time where I was going through that initial period of depression, and I shared something with a friend, and I'm normally I'm a really open book. I'll talk very, very openly. I don't care if people talk about my stuff. I really don't. But in this particular conversation, I'd said to my friend, please don't mention this to anyone. Like, I just want this to stay between you and I. And then the next minute, I had another friend message me basically on the back of what this other friend had told him about what I was going through. And they were worried about me thinking I was suicidal. I wasn't. But I had said some things that made my friend concerned, and then he kind of lent on another friend. And I straight away went to him and I said, look, I'm not saying this to make it a big deal, but I just want to let you know that what you said and did, it's not cool. I specifically told you something in confidence and said, don't repeat that to anyone else.
Yeah.
And you straight away did that. So what I'm going to take that to mean is that I can't trust you with things that I don't want said to other people. Like I probably would have had that conversation with the other friend that he spoke to anyway.
Yeah.
But that was my story to tell, and I had specifically said to him not to repeat that to anyone. So that was kind of, and it was uncomfortable for me to do at the time because it was new, right? Like I'd never done that
for
before.
Sure.
I was standing up for myself, and I kind of was also saying to him, this doesn't need to be a big deal. So that I kind of pre-framed it and softened it a bit. And I said to him, like, it's not a big deal. I'm going to say this once, and then it's not going to be a thing. We're still going to be best mates. We are still best mates to this day, and he's about to come over to Perth, but I needed to say that for myself. And now, years down the track, I mean, this is at least 20 years on now, as soon as someone says or does something that I don't feel good about, I will just say, I'll just say to them that wasn't cool, or, I'll just not cut them off. It's more of, I'll just be like, okay, that's cool. They're not a person that I can rely on. And I just won't rely on them. So
that shows that you've done the work, though.
I've done so much work on myself, and there's still, I have no doubt, so much more work to go.
As we all do, right? So,
yeah.
Now, you've been working with people who have been dealing with addiction, suicidal ideation, all of these things that we've been talking about, trauma, which of course are all tied into mental health. And you've been working with these people for a number of years. I'm curious, have you seen a notable shift in mental health and bringing it to the forefront, or getting more exposure for the issues around mental health since you first started working in this field to where you are now?
Yeah, I mean, there's two answers to that, I suppose. One, I would say yes, definitely, because there's things like the Me Too movement. There are way more people talking about suicide prevention, men speaking out. It's not weak to speak, all those kind of things that we have here in Australia anyway, and in the UK. But someone else on a podcast interview asked me this same question, and I think I have a bit of a warped perspective of it because I do work in this field. So, for me, there's so much talk around this topic that I don't know what it's like to see social media or anything from a point of view of someone who doesn't work in this field, who, from Joe Blogg's point of view, who just has access to normal Facebook or normal news or whatever. Like I don't know what kind of exposure they would get on a daily basis about these kind of topics. So, for me, I've kind of grown over the last 16, 17 years in the topics of mental health, and I've worked really, really actively in those areas. So I see it all day long. But I do feel like it, especially in places like Australia, guys were very much taught to just, like Chopper Read, tough the fuck up. Don't talk about your feelings. That's weak. Yeah. Whereas there are, so many more services now, like Mates in Construction over here, who are, and Beyond Blue, they're very much tailored to guys who are going through depression. So there are a lot more organizations these days that are working with men and women. And I think also post-COVID era as well, like there are so many more online services available, and you can go, like I work with a lot of people who have addictions and go to things like Narcotics Anonymous, and they can attend those via Zoom. I don't think that was a thing before.
No.
You know, so technology has really come into play with people getting things through like BetterHelp and you know, doing video calls or just phone calls with people where I think that accessibility wasn't there necessarily before. So I do think it's grown.
For sure.
But like I said, I'm very biased in what I see because I'm constantly in that field. What about you? What do you think about that?
I think from what I've seen and the people I've talked to, I think there has been a shift. But honestly, I mean, I think we still have a fuck of a long way to go around mental health awareness. And I don't think it's anywhere near where it should be and where it needs to be, because there are so many people that suffer and deal with this stuff in silence because they've been conditioned to not talk about it. It's a dirty secret. It needs to be swept under the rug. We can't talk about these things. And that comes from familial conditioning, societal conditioning, all of these things that play into that. So I think we still have a fuck of a long way to go. And we need, in my opinion, conversation is the catalyst for change. We have to start talking about things. We need to have the difficult conversations. That's how we start to change shit, is talking about it. And it may be uncomfortable, but we need to do it. It has to happen because that's how we start to change things. That's how we start to bring people into the conversation. And it really needs to happen. I mean, that's my 2 cents, and that's what I think. We still have a long way to go, and more people need to get on board with it.
Yeah, I completely agree. But also at the same time, what I'm seeing in the youth space is that I think that, you know, when I'm going to hit 42 this year, and I don't remember the term anxiety ever being used in my upbringing. And for me, a lot of the times when I hear the term anxiety, like you hear a lot of people saying, oh, I've got anxiety, you know, when really they're just feeling stressed. Like I just remember hearing the term stress. Yeah. And, you know, before I had depression, I didn't feel this way. But after I had depression, I got really pissed off with the amount of people that would say just feeling depressed. Because until you've had clinical depression, like I said, I was, you know, I did all my studies in depression. I could have written a thesis on it, but until I had it, I really didn't know. You know, if you haven't gone through what that person that you're speaking to has gone through, you don't fucking know a thing. Yep. You can say that you can empathize with them, but you don't sit there and say, I know what you're going through. Like I've had a chronic pain issue for the last 10 plus years, right? I've got a bulging disc in my neck, and at times it really flares up, and it's very much stress related. And I was chatting to a colleague at work. She looked at me and she could see, like I most of the time I'm about a 5 out of 10 on the pain scale, right? And I've got a high pain threshold. So most of the time, no one would ever know that I'm in pain. But this particular day, I was a good 8, 9 out of 10, and you can see it in my face. And the people that really know me will look at me and say, you're not good today, are you? And I was down at the coffee shop getting a coffee, and I saw this colleague, and she's like, how are you going? Are you okay? You look in pain. I'm like, yeah, I'm really fucking sore. And she said, oh, I know how you feel. I went for a walk yesterday and my calves are sore. And I just thought, fuck you. She's like on the larger side. Like I don't want to fat shame or anything like that, but she's on the larger side, probably doesn't walk very much. And I thought, you went for a 5-10 minute walk and your body hurts a bit. You don't know at all how I feel. Yeah. Just like people don't know at all what it's like to be depressed when they just feel a bit shit one day. Yeah. You know, like you don't know what it's like to have clinical depression unless you've had clinical depression. You don't know what it's like to lose a child unless you've lost a child. You don't know what it's like to have gone through divorce unless you've been divorced. You can't sit there and say, I know how you feel, unless you actually do. People say all the time, I have anxiety. And the thing is that, I'm so grateful that I didn't grow up with social media and a smartphone. Like, I'm so grateful for that. I really am. And I look at my stepkids who are glued to their phones. And although from an adult perspective, yes, we could talk about mental health a lot more, but actually, when I don't know if it's the same in America, but over here in schools, the rate of suicides in teenagers is really, really not good. It's a massive thing that we need to work on. But I also think that things like that kind of make us have a bit of a knee-jerk reaction. And, I've heard of, I've been asked by 3 different mums, do I work with teens? And they explained to me, one of them had a son whose friend committed suicide at 14, and their whole school is going through that, and all the school counsellors and the teachers, everyone, all the mums are watching them look like absolute hawks.
Yeah.
And as a result, teenagers who are going through normal teenage hormones for a start, like I remember being 15 and feeling completely shit.
Yeah.
And knowing that I didn't feel like I had any reason to feel like shit because I had a great family upbringing, like I didn't know why I felt the way that I did. But kids now are going through teenage hormones plus social media, and not just Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, like comparisonitis. Like there's so many people to compare yourself to. And then copycat suicides and, all these people watching them like hawks. It doesn't take much, I'm starting to realize, for a teenager to speak to a school counsellor and get instantly diagnosed with major depression and anxiety when really they're just a little bit hormonal, they've been feeling a bit shit for a couple of days, and suddenly their feelings are pathologized instead of normalized, and they will be sent to their GP and they'll say, take this medication. And I'm getting told this stuff and thinking, what the actual fuck? Like, These are kids who are extremely hormonal and extremely malleable and extremely influenced by their peers. And also, being told by their peers, oh, there's these things called benzos. If you go to your doctor and give these kind of answers to these bunch of questions, you'll really easily get diazepam. They're really good. They'll be diagnosed with depression, anxiety, and then that's a label. And then you hear kids talking about my depression, my anxiety, when I see my therapist, and it's all really pathologizing very, very normal emotions. Like when I was a teenager, I was just probably hormonal. And
those words get tossed around very lightly. Yeah. Very lightly. Exactly. And that's wrong. And that's part of the problem.
Totally. Yeah.
We need to change that. Just because you're feeling sad one day or a couple days does not mean you're fucking depressed. It's okay to have those emotions, but it doesn't mean you're depressed. And who the fuck is a school counselor to diagnose anybody? You're not a doctor.
No. Yeah, exactly. But you know what? I mean, there's this thing called the Depression and Anxiety something scale, the DAS it's called. And it's a very, very simple, you can literally Google it and find the DAS online.
The diagram, is that the diagram of the faces with the numbers?
No, it's just a multiple choice questions. Okay. And it's things like, have you struggled to sleep recently? Have you felt sad in the last 2 weeks? Have you, basically to be diagnosed with clinical depression, you need to have experienced a range of symptoms for a 2-week period or more.
Right.
But when you actually look at the DAS, this inventory, when I was 15, if I'd have gone through that DAS with a doctor, I'd have definitely been diagnosed with depression. But coming from my nearly 42-year-old self, looking back at my 15-year-old self, there's no way that I had depression back then. I was full of raging hormones and I didn't have a clue who I was. And I had all these really profound questions about the meaning of life and why we're here and what happens when we die and, no one to talk to about.
Yeah. Well,
which is just normal for most teenagers.
That's part of being a teenager.
Exactly. But if every teenager gets diagnosed with depression, anxiety or ADHD, which is also a thing that's very common now, and gets medicated on basically amphetamines, then what is the fucking world going to look like in the next 20 years?
Zombies, a zombie apocalypse. That's what I was going to say is that
you seen that meme of that cartoon with everyone looking down at their phones and like the zombie apocalypse?
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly what it'll be. And Big Pharma plays into this whole picture because let's just put them on drugs. Let's get them on drugs. Yeah. Oh, come on, put these pills down your throat.
Behavior, make it easy to be in lessons where they're not actually learning anything.
Yeah, it's that is a big part of the problem too, is Big Pharma and their contribution to this epidemic, to this problem, is
absolutely
the doctors just easily prescribing meds. Here you go, just put yourself on these, you'll be okay. Meanwhile, you're fucking creating zombies when they don't even fucking have depression. So you're giving them pills for shit they don't need.
I'm so glad you're a swearing person, by the way.
Oh yeah.
Because I really am.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And this stuff pisses me off. Like these kids, the teenagers coming up, the young kids, adults coming up, they are the future of the world. And you people are fucking putting them on drugs and zombifying them because that's just the easy route.
Yeah. It's sad.
I mean, it's very, very sad.
I don't know what the next looks like. It's going to be pretty crazy. But, there was an amazing Netflix documentary I watched years ago now. I can't remember what it was called, but it was based on a school in Peckham, which is in southeast London, a really dodgy part of southeast London, which actually, I did about 10 years of voluntary work when I was, kind of school age and then going to university. And one of the voluntary jobs I did was for youth at this organisation called Youth at Risk. And I was a mentor for at-risk youths in a school in Peckham. And I mentored 3 girls who were at risk of expulsion. And they were the ones, I didn't realise till later actually, they were the ones that called me Coach Carly for the first time. And I remember walking across the school field, like there were a bunch of us that got trained and 3 of us that got picked. 2 of the adults were both 42 and I was 24. And I thought, what are kids going to vibe with the most? I went in there with my leather jacket, I wore my hipster jeans, I made sure my tattoo was showing, because I thought that's what they're going to vibe with, right?
Right.
And we kind of all sat there as a group and the teachers were kind of explaining, okay, so this is what this whole mentoring scenario is about. There's 3 mentors at the back of the room and they kind of picked kids to go with various different mentors. And I heard basically there was a bunch of kids that didn't come with me who kicked up a fuss and said, I want to go with her. And I had these 3 girls and I would walk across the school field every time. I don't even remember how long I did it for now. It was a few months. I walked across the school field and I heard, Miss, Coach Carly. And they'd call me Coach Carly. And we'd get in a classroom. This was after school time. And they just looked like they were ready to pop, right? And they just saved all this information for me and they just blurted it all out. And they were like, I wasn't their friend. I wasn't their school teacher. I wasn't their parent. I was just some chick that was coming who was interested in listening to what they had to say. And they would just share all the stuff that was on their mind. They were like, oh, I'm having this fight with my best friend over this crap. And my teacher's really pissing me off. And my dad's really annoying me. And, they just kind of blurted all this stuff out. And I just, it was one of my favorite roles still to this day. And it was such a long time ago now. And
powerful.
more kids need stuff like that. And so there was this Netflix documentary on a school in Peckham. It wasn't the same school. The kids were much younger. And 2 of the things that I remember were that they taught them meditation and mindfulness. So the documentary was, filming what was going on in the schools and then also filming their home environment. So these kids were learning meditation and mindfulness practices and then going home and teaching their parents. And the parents would then get interviewed and just the results that they were having was amazing. And they would read books, normal books like Little Red Riding Hood in school. These were quite young kids. They were maybe, 6, 7, 8, something like that. And out of all the books that they read as a group collectively, the teacher would assign each kid to a different character. So as they were reading the story, the teacher would say, okay, so-and-so, who was supposed to be the wolf, what do you think the wolf was feeling at that point? Well, he was probably hungry. And then the teacher would say, okay, what do you think Little Red Riding Hood was feeling at that point? And they'd be like, oh, she was probably feeling really scared. And, but the wolf didn't really mean it. And, he was just doing wolf things. And so they put these kids in a position where they, as a group, collectively talked about the different perspectives of each of the characters in these books that they were reading. And teaching them meditation. And they were sitting there with their hand on their heart and on their stomach and tuning into their body and what they were feeling and thinking and what it all meant, and that it was okay to feel those things. And teaching them ways of processing it. And then they were going home to their parents in a council flat and teaching their parents how to do these things as well.
Incredible.
I say this all the time. If we all learned personal development techniques in school, can you imagine how different the world would be?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, that's a whole other podcast episode. The education system's completely fucked. It's a waste of time. Yeah. And the documentary, was it called Peckham Finishing School for Girls?
No, because it wasn't that posh. Peckham Finishing School sounds very, very posh.
But yeah, the education system's completely fucked. And like I said, that's a whole other podcast episode, because that needs to change as well. It's a mess. What's that?
It is a mess, yeah.
It is.
I'll get my teacher
horrible.
Yeah,
Carly,
really.
What would you say is one of the most important things you've learned in your life? And what was your life like before learning it? And what was your life like after learning it?
Oh, back to self-love for sure. Before I learned really, truly how to love myself, I continued to attract people into my life who took advantage of me. And I don't blame them for that, because I let them, because I had shit boundaries and no self-love. And my life was very, very different as a result of that. I would have been a lot further ahead in life, financially, emotionally, mentally, in so many different ways. I'd have moved to Australia probably 10 years before I did, because it was a lifelong goal of mine. So many things would be different. I don't regret any of it. It's taught me so, so much. And it's what I coach people on now,
Yeah.
My life is different as a result of learning self-love. Now, God, I live in a country that I'm so grateful to live in. I live, a very short distance to the beach. I get to walk on the beach as often as I want. I have the most amazing dog. I've got the most amazing partner who I really had to, if I hadn't learned to love myself, and I say this to him, if I met him 10 years ago before I really, really loved myself, I would not have given him a second glance. Not because he's not hot, because he's absolutely gorgeous, but there's not a single ounce of malice in him. He has, from the first minute that we met, just demonstrated to me how interested he is in every single thing I say, to the point where the gifts that he buys me years down the track are so thoughtful. One day we were going out and I put a dress on, and I just made this fleeting comment that I didn't have a bag, like a bag to go with that dress. And months later, one of the Christmas gifts that he got me was a black bag that would match any dress that I had. And just things like that let me know that he listens to every single thing I say. But when we met, I had done a lot of self-love work on myself to leave those abusive, toxic relationships. But when we met, I had to do a whole bunch more work on myself to allow his kind of love in, because it's magnificent love, and it scared the shit out of me. I wanted to run away because it was healthy and I wasn't used to that. I thought, no, I'm just going to take this really, really slowly, because I have to watch out for the red flags, because I've never done that before. And months and months in, there were no red flags. And
you're waiting for the other shoe to drop.
I didn't believe it, right?
Yeah.
And then I did a Reiki treatment on him, and he had the most balanced energy field out of anyone that I'd ever done a treatment on in 16 years. And I had energy body envy. I'm like, I'm not as balanced as you. What the fuck? This can't be real. So if I hadn't done that work on myself, I would still be in shit relationships. I was 38 when I met him, and I kind of, I hadn't quite resigned myself to the fact that I wasn't going to meet proper love. But I was getting to that point where I thought, Like I'm a really good person. I've given so much to people. And I found myself at 38 going to fill in a form at a doctor and being asked for who was my next of kin. I thought, who do I write? All my family's in the UK and I'm in Australia.
Yeah.
And that was a real kick in the guts for me, because I thought, wow, I've done so much in my life to help other people. And here I am not even knowing who to write as my next of kin, you know? And when I met him, I really had to do even more work on myself, to love myself enough to let him love me the way that he can. And I think when you think about really anything that's going on in your life, whether you're in a shit relationship or in a shit job, if you're in any kind of situation that you don't like, everything comes down to self-love. Because if you truly, honestly loved yourself and respected yourself enough, you wouldn't stay in any shit situation.
Wow.
So that is my
Powerful.
number one learning in life. And I think it will probably stay my number one learning in life.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Carly.
Pleasure.
Carly, what does the word empowerment mean to you?
Oh, what does the word empowerment mean to me? It means taking back my power. Like through that lack of self-love, I gave my power away to so many people so often, every single day, to the point where I was burnt out, depressed, and literally just a shell on the floor that mates had to scrape up.
Yeah.
And when I loved myself enough, that I think the whole self-love thing means that you feel empowered again. And I feel so empowered these days that I feel empowered enough to be literally 100% authentically me, swear words and all, warts and all, even if it might upset people or rattle people's cages. I don't care, because it's me. And I know that by me being me, it also empowers other people to be more them. And that's a massive goal of mine. Is I want as many people to feel what it feels like to truly love yourself and to truly feel as empowered as I do. Because that is, like, if everyone did that, like if everyone in the world loved themselves, the world would be a very, very different place.
Absolutely. 100% agreed. Okay, we're going to jump into a little rapid fire section here. So the next grouping of questions should just be 2, 3, 4-word answer type thing, okay?
Sure.
How would you describe yourself in one word?
Or authentic.
If you could teach the world one thing, what would it be?
Self-love.
What is your favorite self-care practice?
Oh, probably heavy weightlifting.
If you could be remembered for one thing, what would it be?
Saying the word fuck a lot.
Aside from necessities, what is one thing you could absolutely not go without?
Cuddles.
That concludes our rapid fire section. Now back to our regularly scheduled program. What is something surprising that you've learned about yourself in the past year?
Oh, I hit a place where I got massively triggered by the feelings of abandonment and rejection. It's not in the last year, so I don't know if I'm allowed to answer it like this, but this was just before I met my partner, Cam, and I came out of a whirlwind relationship where I felt extremely triggered and felt just huge abandonment and rejection. I didn't know where that came from because, like I said before, I only remember feeling loved and just completely nourished by my family. So I had to, as a psychologist brain, as a coach brain, I had to go back to my mum and say, tell me the stuff that I don't remember. And she told me that when my brother was born 15 months after me, I'm the eldest child, and mum had postnatal depression and she couldn't cope. And she's Dutch Indonesian, so she grew up in Holland. And she sent me to Holland with my grandparents for 3 months to live so that she could just get on top of, being a new mum to her second baby. And from a developmental point of view as a psychologist, I'm like, wow, I was 15 months old and I went to a new country with different smells, a different language, with people that were family, but I didn't know well enough, and ripped away from my mum for 3 whole months. And I never knew that. I never knew that until I asked and I did the digging, because I didn't understand where this abandonment and rejection stuff came from. So, there's like personal development is a never ending story, right? Like you
for sure
find stuff out about yourself through conversations, through through literally chucking everything at it, that if I didn't know that, if I hadn't had that conversation with my mum about that, then I'd have just been completely in the dark about why I felt so triggered in terms of abandonment and rejection stuff. Like, this doesn't make sense for my life that I remember.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's
fucking huge.
It was massive. And when I healed that, that's when I met Cam, because, I had to heal that stuff to really allow proper love in.
Yeah, for sure. What is one lesson your career has taught you that you think everybody should learn at some point in their life?
Again, it's self-love. No, I keep harping on about it.
I'm seeing a common thread here, Carly.
I know. I suppose that, but also just be unapologetically you. And I think, be your authentic self. And I think the only thing that can allow you to be that with no apologies whatsoever is loving yourself enough to do that. I don't think you can really be your authentic self without loving yourself enough to do so.
Yeah, those go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other, for sure. Mm-hmm. Love it. If you had the opportunity to sit down and have a 1-hour conversation with one woman, any woman in the world, who would it be and why?
It would probably be my great-grandmother, who I've never met.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, my mum is amazing. My Oma, who's my Dutch Indonesian grandmother, when she died at 98, she was amazing. But if I could peer into the soul of her mother, who I never got the chance to meet, I would love to know, because I think I'm an 8th Javanese, and I know that's where my healing side comes from. So I think if I could delve into the Javanese side of my family, it would be really cool to have a chat with her.
If you could go back and give your younger self one piece of advice, what would that piece of advice be?
Oh, I think you can probably guess it by now. It'd be love
yourself.
Love yourself and be unapologetically you, because the world needs you. The world needs you to be.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Lastly, Carly, if you were to deliver your last 30-second speech to the world, like your corner of the world, your tribe, your people, what would that last 30 seconds sound like? What words of wisdom would you impart?
I would say don't be afraid to do the work, because life is a never-ending journey of doing the work on yourself. And it takes courage to do that, but it's so, so worth it, because when you face all your shadow shit, your entire being and the world as a result is a completely different place. You raise your vibration, you raise the vibration of the people around you by proxy. And life is just so much more fun and enjoyable.
Beautiful. I love it. Beautiful way to end the interview, the conversation. Carly, thank you so much. This was an incredibly beautiful, inspirational, and amazing conversation. I appreciate we had lots of laughs and that self-love thread. I mean, it's such an important piece. So thank you so much for sharing your insights and your wisdom and your knowledge, and just keep shining your bright, beautiful light out into the world and doing the beautiful work that you do.
Oh, thank you, Brad. I really appreciate our chat today. It's been so good.
My pleasure and my honor. Once again, my name is Brad Walsh, host of your Empowerography Podcast. Today, my guest has been Carly Evans. She is a Reiki master, teacher, an author, a speaker, an energy healer, a self-love advocate, and a coach. Thank you so much, Carly. I hope you have an amazing rest of the day.
Thank you.